you are. Anyway, I could go on and on, but I'm not going to. Yes?
Sorry, just quickly, I appreciate the conversation in the book, and I just really think that's a brave conversation that not many of the non-Aboriginal population are being brave enough to put out there, let alone travel and do speeches. So I want to really send appreciation from my people here locally at the Kamloops, the Kamloops Indian Band, for your braveness in the conversation, and to the university for having the courage to bring yourself in to speak on this issue. Secondly, an invitation. Our band is hosting the 100-year celebration of the Sir Wilfrid Laurier Memorial, and we'd be more than happy to extend an invitation to yourself to attend. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and I must say, as I've gone around the country over the last, whatever it is, 2 years, I've been constantly very moved by the fact that, it's a bit strange for me to be the guy who's out here saying this sort of thing, but I've talked to a lot of people in the Aboriginal community all for years and years and all the way through, and when I was writing the book, I kept phoning up various friends, like Thompson Highway, and saying, Thompson, if I say this, what happens? Do I get killed? Sort of thing. And but I'm really very moved by the fact that Aboriginal people have been willing to, put up with it. And right at the beginning, I think I was in Winnipeg, and a young First Nations woman got up and she said, I can't believe it. I've been sitting here for an hour and a half listening to some white guy talk about this. But it's okay. I thought, oof. So it's really been a great adventure and very moving for me, and I've learned an enormous amount along the way. And I think I'm so thrilled to hear that you're going to have a 100th-year anniversary. I would encourage the university to do something here so that intellectuals at the university, somehow focus on that. Perhaps the chief could, it's not my place to talk about these things, but I think it would be very interesting for you to be supportive if people are willing for you to be supportive of it. And I'm not quite sure since I became president of International PEN, I don't seem to be off an airplane. So I just literally arrived here from Slovenia. But I would love to come. If I can come, I would really love to come, and I would be very honored to receive the invitation. Very honored, and I'll make sure I give you my address before we leave tonight. It would be fantastic. I'd love to hear what you're planning on doing. It's very exciting. It would be interesting to think about how one could get more people. Vancouver, further than Vancouver, to actually understand how important this is. Yes.
I really want to thank you, and I really appreciate your words, and especially your book. In citing a lot of the elders across Canada, I'm currently doing my master's, and I've been able to cite your book in citing our oral history because they won't accept it. I have to cite a book. And so I And I also agree with you that our universities are decades behind the times, and it's a little embarrassing because we have to relook at some of our disciplines. A few were mentioned, and we have to have a more inclusionary practice within universities. When I looked at taking sociology, they didn't have any of my North American philosophy within that. And I couldn't understand why I had to keep taking it from Europe when most of the people who were teaching it weren't from Europe. And they too had a great worldview that came from Indigenous people. So I really appreciate your words and the fact that hopefully our universities will catch up.
Yeah. I think there's two things. The worrying thing is that, and I mentioned this earlier when the first gentleman spoke, the anthropologist professor spoke, that one of the interesting problems today is what I would call false internationalism. And the false internationalism is this idea that at an international level we're exchanging ideas which we're going to produce something which is a sharing of ideas. Well, of course, a great deal of that is true. But there's also some real problems there that it is indeed like a reintroduction of imperial theory to the world. And that what you're actually seeing through the dominant international languages, and again, I'm not against international languages. I speak English, I speak French. I speak French just the way I speak English. I'm in Slovenia, I spoke French most of the time. And I've written books in French, so I'm not against these languages. And it's good to have international languages, but the difficulty is that if you actually start to think about the world according to international languages, what you're really doing is reconstructing the old imperial structure. Because, of course, how does English run? How does French run? How does Spanish run? It runs according to the lines of the French and the English and the Spanish empires. And so suddenly here you are looking at the use of English. I mean, there's some fight back, obviously, but you're still looking at a structure, for example, in publishing, and writing, or in political science, or in economics, which is actually a reconstruction of the old American-British Empire systems. It's the flow of the ideas through the language, so it's a virtual empire, a virtual intellectual empire. That's a real problem. Now, I think the really interesting thing is that this comeback in Canada of Aboriginal people, and the fact that somebody like me could write a book like this and go around the country and have people really think it sounded right. People who you wouldn't have thought would think it was right. I mean, and it's really surprising who the people are. It's not, you'd be amazed. It's not an old left-wing, right-wing thing or anything. It's often, when people come up to me and say, I think that's it, you know, they're often people you would have thought would have been against it. You never know. You never know with humans where they're going to fall and something like this. And so I think that it's really quite encouraging. And I think what is encouraging about this university is that there is a serious attempt here, as I understand it. I'm not an expert, but it does seem to be a serious attempt here, A, to increase the Aboriginal student population as much as possible. It's apparently about 1,000, and I think the intent is to get it higher, isn't that right? Yeah. And, you know, with the chief and others, I think there's a real attempt to bring Aboriginal ideas into the university. And somewhere along the line, you know, maybe you're one of the universities in that, you know, coalition of that angry, fighting coalition, fighting with each other coalition of universities across the country. Maybe you're one of the universities that can actually begin a revolution which says, hey, what would happen if we thought about English, teaching English literature differently? What would happen if we thought about political science or sociology or anthropology or philosophy differently? And here's what we're doing here. Here's the way we're teaching philosophy now here. We've got a whole new way of doing it. You know, in a way, there are advantages to being a university of 10,000. I mean, the U of T could never do anything like that. They just couldn't do it. They couldn't find the energy or the clarity to do it. You could actually come up with a philosophy course. Not an option on the side, a mainstream philosophy course, which was a whole new shape. I mean, just to finish this, I mean, I remember talking at, I think it's the University of Carleton, where they do a sort of, you know, humanist great books course. And I went to speak to them, and I said I'd like to speak to them, the professors beforehand, and then they gave me their course line. And of course, the course line of the great books was entirely Western, European, you know, European with a few American books. And I said, gosh, that's really odd. I don't see any Islamic philosophy or Buddhist philosophy, or Confucius isn't in here. And to say nothing of the fact that there's nothing about Aboriginals in here. And they said, oh, well, you know, there's so much to teach, and, you know, really all the time is taken up with the European stuff. But of course, if they're interested, they can go on to do other things. That's not a great books course. That's a colonial outcropping of Oxbridge. That's what that is. That's not appropriate to Canada, and it's not useful. I mean, it's useful because they're interesting books, but it's not terribly useful. Because, you know, the utility of it is outweighed by the deformity that it produces in the mind about how the world really works. Not just how Canada works, how the world works. Because you produce these kids who are brilliant and have read all these books, and they actually don't understand what China's about. This is rather an inappropriate time not to understand what China's about. They don't understand what Japan's about. They don't understand what India's about. And of course they don't understand what Canada's about. Because there were no Canadian great books in the course. So what they understand is the Enlightenment. Well, they might have Gilgamesh and a few things which are great, you know. It's not that they're bad books, it's just that it's a misunderstanding of the world and of their own country. Anyway,